Now, if you're a foreigner and you're planning to travel to Kenya, just know that you will still need to apply for a document allowing you to enter the country that many are saying is equivalent to a visa. Late last year, President William Ruto announced that at the beginning of 2024, Kenya will be a visa-free country. But the big question is, what is free? Well, there's a new system. It's called the Electronic Travel Authorization, where applications are processed within 3 days. All travelers, excluding those from the East African community, need to submit all their paperwork for approval. They'll also need to pay a processing fee worth $30. And so far, more than 9,000 people have submitted their applications. But some travelers are upset about the idea flaunted by President Ruto of Kenya being visa-free. Now, before this year, citizens from 51 countries enjoyed visa-free entry to Kenya, meaning that they could easily book a flight, pay for their accommodation, and fly to Kenya. They still got their passport scanned, fingerprints, and photo taken by immigration officials. Now, one of them is Sean Mendis, who's a frequent traveler to Kenya from Malawi. I asked him whether he's used this new system and what his experience was like.
The system was quite confusing. It asked for a lot of documents that we had been led to believe would not be required. On top of that, it even said that the standard ETA, which would take 72 hours to process, is not changeable. So if your flight's changed, you would have to scrap that ETA and go ahead and get another one. Or you could pay extra for a premium ETA, which allowed you to make one change to your ETA after that. It's very much in its teething phase, but up to this point, my experiences with it have been more confusing than reassuring.
The Kenyan authorities have been saying this is a much needed improvement over the old system that was there in place before. How do you respond to that?
I don't see a difference with the old system. Quite honestly, it's just got a different website. I mean, I apply for 2 or 3 Kenyan visas a year when I travel to Kenya. And, in the past, the visas required you to provide an itinerary. But if your plans changed and you had to come the next day, or you missed your connecting flight in Addis Ababa and, you got rebooked to the evening flight instead of the morning, you could still travel on that visa. It was still valid. If you needed multiple entries, you could apply for a multiple entry visa. And that's something I used to do regularly because I used to transit through Kenya on the way to Somalia. So I'd come into Nairobi, I'd fly off to Mogadishu the next morning, I'd come back from Mogadishu 2 days later, and I didn't have to wait 3 days in whatever country I was traveling to apply for a new ETA. So this is a step backwards. The ETA, at least in its current form, is regressive. It is more restrictive than the old system was. It offers less options than the old system was. And while it may be $20 cheaper than the old tourist visa was, quite honestly, people who are coming to Kenya are less, the visa people, the people who required visas in the past, are not going to be encouraged by a $20 drop in the price. They're not going to be turned away by it. What is going to turn people away is the fact that the logistics of getting this visa, the paperwork required to get this visa, the waiting period to get this visa, and I'm calling it a visa rather than an ATA because that's what it is, that has made travel to Kenya a lot harder for now.
When you wanted to test the system, what had been your expectation? Bearing in mind the president had announced to the world that Kenya is visa-free. What had been your expectation?
That's where the main expectations were very high. The announcement was made that first that all Africans would be visa-free and then the entire world would be visa-free. And, you'd expect that an ETA would be something similar to ETAs in other parts of the world where you submit your passport details, and you get a reference number which is valid for, say, 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever else. An ETA that is linked to a very specific trip and to a very specific set of flights and accommodation is effectively a visa.
Kenyans are even concerned, just off the back of what you're telling us, that these challenges could lead to boycotts or reciprocal restrictions by other countries. Do you think those fears are justified with the experience you've undergone so far?
Oh, definitely. I think this is going to happen, and it's a matter of when rather than if. I think a lot of countries are looking at what's going to happen. It's early days. They'll probably give 6 weeks, 8 weeks. But, for example, South Africa, there was a major big hue and cry over the reciprocal visa-free arrangement between Kenya and South Africa that came into force, I think, January last year. And we've seen how that has really benefited Kenya. But today, a South African has to apply for this ETA and pay money to Kenya to come in, while a Kenyan can just get on a plane and fly to Johannesburg or Cape Town or wherever else. And that is not something that the South African government is going to take lying down if it persists for, for more than a short term or a transition period.